Welcome to 30 Days of IBS Foods. We are very nearly near the end of this series. I've only got 3 more days to record. Today, I want to talk to you, though, about wheat. This is one of the first things that people will give up even before they know what is wrong with their gut. People suggest going gluten-free and cutting out bread and pasta. So I wanted to tackle a little bit about why these whole grains are good for you and how you can still manage to eat some of them, even if you have IBS. I'm also going to just quickly mention about the test for celiac disease, because that is an important part of you considering whether not to give up gluten. When we are thinking about the benefits of whole grains, we're talking about spelt, wheat, rye, all of these different grains. Like, they are all very similar in structure and in their nutrient content. But I wanted to focus in specifically on wheat because that is the most common grain in our culture, and that is what most people eat multiple times a day. The fibre in the whole grains has been linked to a reduction in colon cancer, healthy weight management, reduction of diabetes, reduction of stroke and heart attacks. There are so many clear links between eating whole grains and a reduction in many chronic health conditions. Whole grains is the thing I want to really focus in on, though, because white bread, it's processed. What happens is they're just polishing the shell off the grain. As some of that shell is polished off the grain, then what happens is you're losing some of the key nutrients like zinc and iron and the B vitamin, taking off that shell, making it easier to digest, making it white bread, white pasta. We're losing some of those nutrients. And so we're losing some of the benefit. We're also losing some of the fiber content. Let's talk about how these grains affect IBS. So the impact on your digestion could be significant. It could be quite minimal. When I see people trying to give up gluten in order to improve their gut symptoms, it's often from a place of eating wheat-based carbohydrates multiple times a day. So perhaps you're having a cereal for breakfast or toast, then you're having a sandwich for lunch, then you're having some pasta for dinner. And all 3 of your main meals have been based around wheat. It may not be the fact that you need to go gluten-free and you are reacting to gluten. It might be that the case that you're having too much of this type of fiber, and it is rapidly fermentable. Like, your gut bacteria do love the fiber from wheat. But if you're having it multiple times a day, maybe it's too much. So sometimes some of the benefit of going gluten-free or cutting out bread and pasta comes from what you're adding in as a replacement. So maybe you switch from cereal to oats and you have porridge for breakfast, or perhaps then you switch to a brown rice pasta. So you're having different types of fiber, and it's not necessarily always the case that wheat is the bad thing that's making your symptoms worse. It's that you're just having too much of it. If you are not sure whether you've been tested for celiac disease or not, it's really important that you test for this before you give up all gluten. The first stage of assessing for celiac disease involves a blood test from your doctor, and this is looking for antibodies to gluten. This will only be present in your body if you have been eating gluten. After 6 weeks of not eating any wheat or any grains like spelt, rye, etc., then your body will stop making these antibodies because you just haven't been exposed to them. So when we test for your blood, you won't get the picture, and therefore you'll get a false negative test, which can be very confusing. So if you have not been tested for celiac disease, then the first thing you should do is get that done before you give up gluten. If you've already given up gluten and you go to have a test for celiac disease, it could be a false negative, which is really important because there is a big difference between going gluten-free and having celiac disease. When you do have celiac disease, you need to be 100% committed to no gluten exposure, because even 20 parts per million can cause damage to the gut. Really needs to be taken seriously, which means you need to have no gluten in your house, ideally. If you do share a house with people who are also eating gluten, you need to have your own separate butter and jam so that you're not getting any contamination. You need people to be wiping up every single crumb so it doesn't affect you. If you don't manage it correctly, you can end up with nutrient insufficiency or malabsorption of key nutrients because of the damage to the gut. So It's really important that you know that first. I just wanted to stress that. I do have an episode on celiac disease. Please go back and listen to that episode if you want more details on gluten and IBS. So let's think about, for those who have had a negative set test, you did the test properly, you haven't got celiac disease, but maybe you still find wheat can upset your stomach. Firstly, I would suggest that you look at how often you're eating it in your day. Do you need to eat it every day? Could you try having less of it rather than cutting it out altogether? Because the high fiber content and all the other good benefits are really helpful to have in there in terms of heart health and gut regularity. Now, if you're sensitive to bread and pasta, let's think about what that means for you and your digestive capacity. So 1 slice of whole wheat bread is high for 2 FODMAP groups. That's galacto-oligosaccharides and fructans, GOS and fructans. But white bread is just high for the fructans. So if you wanted to do some sort of gentle reintroduction of wheat, if you haven't eaten it for a while, then just starting with some white bread is helpful. Listen to the episode I did on fermented foods a couple of days ago, because that also touches on sourdough and how that is slightly easier to digest for some people because of the lowering of fructan and the lowering of gluten in the fermentation process. If you enjoy bread and you want to keep it in there, then just having 1 slice of white bread every now and again could be a way to keep up some exposure to wheat. And then you could try going on to 1 slice of whole wheat bread, maybe even starting with half a slice if you are nervous. 1 portion of pasta is going to tip you into a high FODMAP amount. So what we want to try and do is bring it back to a small amount, which is only 75 grams of cooked pasta. This is about half a portion. So really it's only like 2 tablespoons. It's not much. It would just be enough to test your tolerance to the fructan element. Now, as I've said a couple of times throughout this 30 days of IBS foods, you have to test multiple fructan groups separately. So with the FODMAP diet, normally we can just take a food from the sorbitol category or from fructose and we can test and give us information about the rest of the category. But we've got 4 categories within fructan that we want to test separately. This would be your wheat test. Start off with sourdough if you haven't had any, because this is probably the lowest amount of fructan. You could start with white sourdough. Then you could progress to white normal bread, just 1 slice a day for a couple of days, see how that feels. Then you could go up to a whole wheat slice, because that is where we're getting the most benefit from eating wheat. So if you are giving up wheat and you know that you can't have any whole grains, you really need to focus on fiber. And this could come from pulses, from other grains like quinoa, oats, as well as all your fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, all of those things. Whole grains are a big part of our diet, big part of our culture. When you cut them out and you eat gluten-free products, you are likely going to be dropping down your fiber content, which can lead to issues with your gut health in time. So it's better to keep it in if you can tolerate it. I know that this is a tricky category and it's often a fear food for a lot of people with IBS because of people reading that gluten is inflammatory, and you're worried about leaky gut, you're worried about toxic elements to foods. Most of this is not rooted in science and it's not rooted with any evidence. Gluten is not inflammatory. Gluten does not destroy your gut. Eating whole grains is a really important and healthy part of a balanced diet, and it's something that I would encourage you to include if you can. But if you haven't eaten for it for a while, then do try to bring it back in a careful, considered way, because then you will getting some data, some information about what your tolerance is and how much you can handle. Join me tomorrow for another day of 30 days of IBS foods.